I'm Sean Aylmer, and this is a Fear and Greed extended interview. All the other good bits we couldn't fit into the daily podcast. If you're looking for the daily episode of Fear and Greed, check the podcast playlist. Otherwise, enjoy the interview. Trade is critical to Australia's economic outlook, and particularly our relationship with China. While traditionally Australia has sold agricultural and commodity products to the rest of the world, nowadays service industries such as education and tourism are almost as important. The Australian Trade and Investment Commission, better known as Austrade, has just released its annual benchmark report for 2021, which provides economic and financial data about trading with Australia. To talk us through the report's findings, I'd like to welcome back to Fear and Greed Austrade Chief Economist Cherelle Murphy. Hi, Cherelle.
Good morning, Sean.
Tell me, what is the benchmark report?
Well, so you know how you read in the papers all the time that Australia ranks first on this measure, 10th on that measure, 25th on this measure, whether it's livability or digital readiness or research capability. Well, what the BMR does is it tries to pull all of that information together, only the credible ones, mind you, and we also combine it with many of our own insights on the Australian economy and how the Australian economy compares to others. And what we were trying to do here is show why Australia is a great place to invest and to do business. This report is in its 21st year, so we've got quite a bit of practice at pulling this information together.
Okay, so in a sense, it's a one-stop shop. All those surveys and things that we read throughout the year, this is almost the place to go if you want to have all that brought together to get a snapshot of where Australia sits in the global trade world.
That's exactly right, yep.
Fantastic. So what's it telling us about Australia this year? And is it very different to previous years?
Well, it's interesting because COVID's made it quite clear how well Australia does things, if you like, to put it bluntly. We're not perfect, but we have come through this crisis better than most. And by that, I mean, we've managed to combine relatively low transmission of COVID through the community and low fatality rates with relatively low GDP losses. So in the March and June quarters last year, we lost about $36 billion in GDP. But in the September and December quarters, we got back 30.5 billion of that. So we're already recovering pretty quickly. We've also managed to get a lot of the people who lost their jobs back to work, and that can't be said by many other countries. It's not been the case that everyone has come through this crisis in good shape, and I'm not suggesting for a minute that some people, their lives haven't been changed forever for the worse by the pandemic. But on the whole, we have done better than most countries. I like the Bloomberg Resilience Index. The Bloomberg Resilience Index is an indicator of how we have coped with the crisis, and Australia comes second only to New Zealand on that score. Also, we're likely to move up the global scale of economic rankings according to the IMF to number 12 from number 14 in 2019, which essentially means our economy has actually kind of gotten bigger as a proportion relative to other countries in the world. And look, it's no accident, of course, that we've come through this crisis so well. We're a country with smart people. We've got really solid governance, and we've got policy settings that moved very quickly to adjust to the crisis. So we managed to minimize the damage from the COVID shock with a whole lot of economy-wide measures and then more targeted industry-specific fiscal assistance where it was needed. So with all of that, and even with trade disputes in the background and significant disruptions to immigration, international visitors, we've still managed to record 37 monthly trade surpluses in a row.
Yeah. There's a little bit of luck, though, isn't there? I mean, I'm thinking about iron ore here and the price of iron ore particularly.
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, in the year to January, we shipped 700 million tons of iron ore to China, and that earned us $97 billion. So, of course, that is definitely part of the story. China is clearly our biggest trading partner, and it rebounded from the crisis quickly. So demand for many of our products grew. And as you know, China was one of the few countries, in fact, that recorded positive growth in 2020. But it's not just a China story. Australia's top trading partners were in relatively good shape before the pandemic, and as a whole, according to IMF forecasts, are expected to come out of it stronger too. So that's been part of the story as well.
Okay, so I understand that our settings were very strong and it got us through the pandemic relatively well. Where are we getting better at, though? You talked about us going from 14 to 12 on OECD rankings. What is it that we're doing better?
Well, I mean, obviously we do some things really well and it's been well established. Our commodities sector is, proof of that clearly. But in those, more niche markets, so the rare earth minerals, for example, this is an area where investment is definitely growing and demand for rare earth minerals is growing. Lithium ion batteries used in electric vehicles, for example, we're a supplier of those. And clearly that's something that's likely to continue. On the farming front, we've got very high agricultural standards. The world views us as a clean, green producer of food. And so, as long as it rains, we can sell our produce at really good premiums overseas. To choose an entirely different example, we've got a very large, robust, and growing financial services market. Now, that's in large part due to our superannuation system. So while that is, of course, really about workers' retirement security, it has also created a really successful industry, and that attracts global talent to Australia. We're also very culturally diverse, as we know, and diversity is an asset. It contributes to our sort of intercultural understanding, if you like, and our Asian language skills are a great asset for doing business in our region. We've got the third highest proportion of foreign-born citizens amongst the OECD. And something else we're getting better at is digital. So in 2020, the UN ranked Australia as fifth in the world for digital government services. And the World Economic Forum also scores Australia fifth for e-participation.
I understand the rare earth stuff, and Linus's share price has run more than 300% over the last 12 months, and we're one of the few non-Chinese producers. What I didn't understand, though, was our digital capability and just how strong we are in that, because if we're talking about the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years, you want to be at the top of the digital rankings.
Indeed, that's right. And clearly we have to move with where the global economy is moving. And the fact that we're moving along well in that and those rankings, of course, is a great potential source of growth going forward.
Cherelle, stay with me. We'll be right back. I'm talking to Chief Economist at Austrade, Cherelle Murphy. I suppose the two big ones, though, that didn't have a good 2020 are education and tourism, and they're part of the service sector. They've actually been real success stories over the last decade. They had a pretty rotten year, didn't they?
Yeah, look, they absolutely did. And in fact, we calculate that there were losses of about $67.5 billion in the visitor economy in 2020. That's a really big sting. And incidentally, of course, that's why the government is continuing support into that particular sector as it copes with international border closures. There's not much we can do while those borders are closed apart from try and keep that part of the economy going until demand comes back. And international education, as you say, also had a really tough year. International education commencements fell by 23% in 2020. Australia is the third most popular destination for foreign students, and to lose that flow of students is clearly very damaging. But look, our universities are not going away, and clearly they're trying very hard to move forward and hang on to the interest from those students. And look, we have 7 of Australia's universities rank in the world's top 100, so we remain a very popular destination for international students.
What about tensions with China? Will that hold us back?
Look, clearly for some exporters, this is a very big deal. In the forestry industry, for example, there are no easy short-term solutions to the problem of where to divert their product. For other industries where there have been barriers to trade with China put up, other markets have opened up. So barley is one example where export product has been sold elsewhere. In fact, it's off to Mexico and being used in Heineken. Overall, though, while there are clearly some industries hurting a lot, our trade with China is actually still growing. And in the medium term, there's still that ongoing complementarity between what China wants and what Australia can offer. So I don't think demand is simply going to disappear there. Again, China's not our only trading partner. And, we can already see diversification of export markets, especially small exports. So outside of the agricultural and resources areas, our smaller exports are much more diverse in their markets. And look, we're also going about trying to work on free trade agreements with a number of regions at the moment, including the EU, Gulf Cooperation Council, India, and the UK. And on the investment front, so this is where foreign firms invest into Australia, our biggest partners there are the US, the UK, and Japan. So again, outside of China.
So the benchmark report talks lots about business and government. Does it actually look at people like you and I, Cherelle? Like, how do we rate?
Look, Australian households are a really important part of what makes our economy perform well or not well. Our consumption's worth a bit under two-thirds of GDP. So, that makes our spending a really important part of how the economy travels along. My husband would argue that I am particularly good at propping up GDP and with my shopping habits, and who am I to argue with that
When you
noble?
have children, Cherelle, when you have children, you have no choice but to spend money. Tell your husband that.
That's right. I have children and a desire for a lot of shoes. But look, in terms of how we rate against the rest of the world, yes, we have quite high disposable incomes, which of course helps our economy along. And according to the Economist Intelligence Unit, Australia is the ninth largest high income consumer market. So what that means is that there are 6.8 million households generating an income of above US $50,000, and that's on US dollars because obviously it's an international comparison. As a population, as a whole, we're actually pretty well off.
I had no idea our consumer market was that big relative to other economies.
Yeah, we do quite well.
Wow. So where can we find the benchmark report?
So austrade.gov.au/benchmark report. You can find it there. There's lots of interactive graphics and lots to learn. It's actually quite fun to play with. And you can actually download the data from our charts yourself and use it in your own business pitch if there's some of this information that can help with your business ideas and just showing how good we are on so many different scales. So have a look.
I'll be bookmarking it and using it on Fear and Greed regularly, I guarantee you. Cherelle, thank you for talking to Fear and Greed.
Thank you again for having me.
That was Cherelle Murphy, Chief Economist at Austrade.